Right now, while you're listening to this, millions of people are drowning in noise. Not just the obvious kind, the traffic, the notifications, the endless chatter, but the mental noise that's slowly stealing their ability to think, to feel, to be. And here's what nobody wants to admit. We're terrified of silence. But what if I told you that the very thing you're running from, that uncomfortable quiet, that space where you're alone with your thoughts, is actually your greatest tool for mental reset? What if the isolation you've been taught to fear is the exact breakthrough you need to rebuild your mind? See, while everyone else is chasing the next dopamine hit, scrolling through endless feeds, filling every moment with stimulation, there's a small group of people doing something radically different. They're choosing silence, they're embracing what I call monk mode, and they're discovering something extraordinary. Solitude isn't weakness, it's power. The greatest visionaries in history, from Einstein to Steve Jobs, they all had one thing in common. Before their biggest breakthroughs, they sought silence and healing. They understood that mental clarity doesn't come from adding more to your mind. It comes from creating space. It comes from having the discipline to sit with yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. Right now, you might be thinking, but I can't handle being alone with my thoughts. What if I fall apart? And that's exactly why you need this. Because the quiet mind you're afraid of, that's where your real strength lives. That's where recovery happens. That's where you stop reacting to life and start creating it. This isn't about becoming a hermit or cutting yourself off from the world forever. This is about mental strength training. This is about learning that you don't need constant external validation, entertainment, or distraction to exist. You are enough. Your mind, when given the chance to reset, is incredibly powerful. So if you're ready to stop running from yourself, if you're ready to discover what happens when you choose solitude over stimulation, when you choose focus and isolation over chaos and noise, then stay with me. Because what I'm about to share will change how you see silence forever. Your brain has a dirty little secret. It's been lying to you about what it needs. For years, neuroscientists have been studying what they call the default mode network, the brain's background operating system that only activates when you're not actively focused on something. And here's the kicker. This network is where all your mental strength training actually happens. When you're constantly stimulated, this network never gets to do its job. It's like having a cleaning crew that can only work when the office is empty, but the office never closes. The result? Mental clutter builds up. Unprocessed emotions pile up in corners. Your ability to rebuild your mind gets buried under layers of digital debris. But something fascinating happens during focus and isolation. Within just 20 minutes of genuine silence, no phone, no music, no distractions, your brain begins what researchers call neural housekeeping. It starts consolidating memories, processing emotions, and making connections between ideas that seemed completely unrelated. This isn't meditation or mindfulness. This is your brain literally rebuilding itself. Think about the last time you had a breakthrough idea. I guarantee it wasn't while you were scrolling social media or binge-watching Netflix. It was probably in the shower, on a walk, or lying in bed just before sleep. These moments of quiet mind aren't accidents. They're when your brain finally has the space to do what it does best: create, connect, and solve problems. The dopamine reset that happens during intentional silence is equally powerful. Every notification, every like, every piece of content triggers a small dopamine release. Over time, your brain needs bigger and bigger hits to feel satisfied. It's addiction, plain and simple. But when you step into monk mode, you're essentially going through withdrawal and coming out stronger on the other side. Cognitive psychologists have discovered that people who regularly practice solitude therapy show increased activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making, emotional regulation, and long-term planning. Meanwhile, the amygdala, your brain's alarm system, becomes less reactive. You literally become calmer, more focused, and better at handling stress. This isn't about becoming antisocial or disconnected from reality. This is about giving your brain the recovery time it desperately needs. Just like your muscles need rest between workouts to grow stronger, your mind needs silence between stimulations to develop mental clarity. The discipline to choose silence isn't punishment, it's the ultimate form of self-care. Dr. Andrew Huberman, Stanford neuroscientist and host of one of the world's most respected science podcasts, has spent years studying how our brains actually function, and his findings will shock you. According to Huberman's research, the modern brain is operating in a state of chronic hypervigilance that's literally rewiring our neural pathways for anxiety, distraction, and mental weakness. Here's what Huberman discovered. When you're constantly switching between tasks, checking notifications, and consuming content, you're activating what he calls task switching penalties. Each time your brain shifts focus, it takes an average of 23 minutes to fully concentrate again. But here's the kicker. Most people switch tasks every 3 minutes. Do the math. Your brain never actually focuses on anything. Huberman's lab has shown that silence and healing aren't just feel-good concepts. They're neurobiological necessities. During periods of genuine quiet, your brain activates what he terms focused attention networks. These networks can only function when external stimuli are minimized. It's like trying to hear a whisper in a nightclub. Impossible until you step outside. The dopamine reset that happens during intentional isolation is even more powerful than most people realize. Huberman explains that dopamine isn't actually the pleasure chemical, it's the seeking chemical. Every notification, every scroll, every piece of content triggers dopamine release not because it feels good, but because your brain thinks something better is coming next. You're literally addicted to anticipation, not satisfaction. But when you enter monk mode, something Huberman calls dopamine fasting occurs naturally. Your baseline dopamine levels reset. Suddenly, simple pleasures, a conversation, a sunset, your own thoughts, become genuinely rewarding again. You're not chasing the next hit because you're actually satisfied with what's in front of you. Huberman's research on mental clarity reveals that the brain's default mode network, the system responsible for creativity, problem-solving, and emotional processing, only activates during periods of reduced external stimulation. This means your best ideas, your deepest insights, your most authentic emotions are literally being blocked by constant input. The focus and isolation that feels uncomfortable at first is actually your brain returning to its natural state. Huberman's studies show that people who regularly practice what he calls deliberate boredom develop stronger prefrontal cortex activity, better emotional regulation, and increased neuroplasticity. They don't just think better, they literally grow new neural pathways. This isn't ancient wisdom or spiritual philosophy. This is cutting-edge neuroscience confirming what the greatest minds in history already knew. Solitude isn't weakness. It's where mental strength is forged. When you choose silence over stimulation, you're not missing out on life. You're finally showing up for it. Here's the paradox that will blow your mind. The more you disconnect from external noise, the more connected you become to what actually matters. While everyone else is drowning in shallow connections, hundreds of social media friends, endless group chats, constant digital interactions, you're developing something far more valuable, a deep, unshakable connection to yourself. Think about the last meaningful conversation you had. Not the surface level, how was your day exchanges, but a real conversation that left you feeling understood, inspired, or changed. I guarantee that conversation happened when both people were fully present, not distracted by phones or external noise. That's what solitude therapy teaches you, how to be fully present first with yourself, then with others. The quiet mind you develop through intentional isolation becomes your superpower in a world of scattered attention. While others are constantly reacting to external triggers, you're responding from a place of internal stability. You're not desperate for validation because you've learned to validate yourself. You're not afraid of silence in conversations because you're comfortable with silence in your own head. This is where mental strength training gets really interesting. When you can sit alone for an hour without reaching for your phone, without turning on music, without filling the space with distraction, you develop what psychologists call distress tolerance. You learn that uncomfortable emotions won't kill you. Boredom won't destroy you. Anxiety, sadness, even fear. They're just temporary visitors, not permanent residents. But here's what nobody tells you about monk mode. It doesn't make you antisocial. It makes you selectively social. When you're not desperate for human connection to fill an internal void, you start choosing relationships based on quality, not quantity. You stop tolerating toxic people because you're not afraid of being alone. You start attracting healthier relationships because you're relating from wholeness, not neediness. The discipline of choosing silence over stimulation ripples into every area of your life. When you can resist the urge to check your phone for an hour, you can resist the urge to eat when you're not hungry. When you can sit with uncomfortable thoughts without distracting yourself, you can sit with uncomfortable situations without running away. Focus and isolation become training grounds for every other challenge you'll face. This is why the greatest leaders, artists, and innovators throughout history have been comfortable with solitude. They understood that mental clarity doesn't come from consuming more information. It comes from processing the information you already have. They knew that breakthrough moments don't happen in crowded rooms. They happen in quiet spaces where your mind has room to breathe, to wander, to create. You're not isolating yourself from life. You're preparing yourself to engage with life more fully, more authentically, more powerfully than ever before. Here's what the mental health industry doesn't want you to know. You have more power to heal your own mind than any external intervention can provide. While millions of Americans are spending billions on therapy, medication, and wellness products, there's a growing movement of people discovering something revolutionary, that silence and healing can happen without depending on anyone or anything outside yourself. Don't misunderstand me, professional help has its place. But what happens when your therapist isn't available? What happens when your medication runs out? What happens when your support system fails you? The people who've mastered solitude therapy have an answer. They've learned to be their own first responder. The mental reset that occurs during intentional isolation is fundamentally different from external treatments because it's teaching you to fish instead of giving you a fish. When you sit in silence with your anxiety instead of immediately calling someone or taking something to make it go away, you're developing what neuroscientists call self-regulation skills. You're literally rewiring your brain to handle distress without external dependencies. This is where monk mode becomes a form of mental strength training that no gym membership can provide. Every time you choose to sit with discomfort instead of distracting yourself, you're building psychological muscle. Every time you process an emotion in quiet mind instead of venting to someone else, you're developing emotional independence. You're becoming mentally self-sufficient. The dopamine reset that happens during these periods of intentional withdrawal is particularly powerful for people who've been using external stimulation to manage their internal state. Instead of needing constant entertainment to feel okay, constant social interaction to feel worthy, or constant achievement to feel valuable, you start finding stability in simply being. You discover that you don't need to be constantly doing something to justify your existence. But here's the most profound part. When you stop running from your thoughts and emotions, they stop chasing you. The anxiety you've been avoiding through endless scrolling? It actually has something important to tell you. The sadness you've been numbing with constant noise? It's pointing you toward what you've lost and need to reclaim. The anger you've been suppressing with people-pleasing? It's showing you where your boundaries have been violated. Recovery through solitude isn't about becoming a hermit. It's about becoming whole. When you can handle your own emotional weather without immediately seeking shelter in external distractions, you become incredibly resilient. You stop being a victim of your circumstances and start being the author of your responses. This discipline of facing yourself, of sitting with whatever arises without immediately reaching for relief, is the foundation of all other forms of strength. When you can handle 15 minutes alone with your thoughts, you can handle difficult conversations. When you can process emotions without external validation, you can make decisions based on your own wisdom, rather than other people's opinions. Here's what happens when you finally stop running from yourself. You discover that most of what you thought was important was just noise. The endless to-do lists, the social obligations you don't actually enjoy, the goals you're chasing because someone else told you they mattered, all of it starts to fall away when you give your mind space to breathe. Mental clarity isn't about seeing more, it's about seeing what actually matters. The average American makes about 35,000 decisions per day. But here's the problem. Most of these decisions are being made by a mind that's never quiet enough to know what it actually wants. You're choosing based on external pressure, social expectations, or whatever seems urgent in the moment. But silence cuts through all that noise and reveals something profound: your authentic priorities. When you enter monk mode, something remarkable happens in the first few days. All the surface-level concerns, what people think of you, whether you're missing out on something, the latest drama in your social circle, start to feel incredibly small. It's like stepping back from a painting you've been examining with a magnifying glass and suddenly seeing the whole picture. What seemed overwhelming up close becomes manageable from a distance. This is where focus and isolation become your secret weapon for decision-making. Instead of constantly reacting to whatever's loudest or most urgent, you start responding from a place of deep knowing. You begin to distinguish between what you want and what you think you should want, between what serves your growth and what just serves your ego, between what brings genuine fulfillment and what just provides temporary distraction. The quiet mind you develop through intentional solitude becomes like a compass that always points toward your true north. While others are spinning in circles, chasing every opportunity, saying yes to everything, you're moving with purpose and direction. You're not busier, you're more effective. You're not doing more, you're doing what matters. But here's the most powerful part. When you know what you actually want, you stop being manipulated by what other people want you to want. The advertising that used to trigger impulse purchases loses its power. The social pressure that used to dictate your choices becomes irrelevant. The fear of missing out transforms into the joy of choosing in. This breakthrough in clarity doesn't just affect big life decisions, it transforms daily choices. You stop scrolling mindlessly because you know it doesn't serve you. You stop saying yes to social events that drain you because you value your energy. You stop consuming content that makes you feel worse because you've learned to protect your mental space. Discipline becomes easier when you're clear on your priorities because you're not fighting against yourself anymore. You're not using willpower to force yourself to do things you don't really want to do. You're using clarity to align your actions with your authentic desires. The mental strength training of silence reveals that true power isn't about forcing yourself to change. It's about becoming clear enough to choose change naturally. We're living through a mental health crisis that nobody wants to talk about: learned helplessness. An entire generation has been conditioned to believe they can't handle their own thoughts, emotions, or problems without constant external support. But there's a quiet revolution happening. People are discovering that mental strength training through silence can make you more psychologically independent than any external system ever could. Think about how we've been trained to handle discomfort. Feeling anxious? Call someone. Feeling bored? Grab your phone. Feeling sad? Buy something. Feeling overwhelmed? Binge watch something. We've created a society of people who are terrified of their own internal experience. But monk mode flips this script entirely. Instead of running from discomfort, you learn to sit with it. Instead of needing external solutions, you develop internal resources. This is where solitude therapy becomes revolutionary. When you can process your emotions without immediately needing to talk to someone about them, you develop what psychologists call emotional self-efficacy. You learn that you have the capacity to understand, regulate, and heal your own psychological states. You stop being dependent on other people's availability, mood, or willingness to help you feel okay. The dopamine reset that occurs during intentional isolation is particularly powerful for breaking dependency patterns. Instead of needing constant stimulation to feel alive, constant validation to feel worthy, or constant entertainment to feel engaged, you start finding richness in simplicity. A sunset becomes genuinely beautiful again. A conversation becomes genuinely interesting. Your own thoughts become genuinely worth listening to. But here's what makes this approach so powerful. Mental clarity through silence doesn't just help you handle your current problems, it prevents future ones. When you're comfortable with solitude, you make better relationship choices because you're not choosing from desperation. When you can sit with uncertainty, you make better career decisions because you're not rushing into the first option that feels safe. When you can handle boredom, you develop genuine interest instead of just consuming whatever's trending. The discipline of choosing focus and isolation over constant stimulation builds what researchers call psychological resilience. You're not just surviving life's challenges, you're developing the capacity to thrive regardless of external circumstances. You become like a tree with deep roots instead of a leaf blown around by every wind. This breakthrough in mental independence doesn't make you antisocial, it makes you genuinely social. When you're not desperate for human connection to fill an internal void, your relationships become healthier. You're connecting from choice, not need. You're sharing from abundance, not emptiness. You're loving from wholeness, not brokenness. The quiet mind you develop becomes your greatest asset in a world that profits from your mental chaos. While others are being manipulated by algorithms designed to keep them scrolling, you're thinking for yourself. While others are being triggered by content designed to provoke reactions, you're responding from a place of calm. You've become mentally autosufficient in a world designed to keep you dependent. Here's where everything changes. You've heard the science, you understand the theory, but now it's time for the real question. How do you actually rebuild your mind starting today? Because knowledge without action is just entertainment, and you didn't come this far to stay where you are. This is your practical blueprint for the next 30 days. The exact system that will transform your relationship with silence from fear to power. Week 1 is about breaking the addiction. Start with just 15 minutes each morning. No phone, no music, no distractions. Sit with whatever comes up. Your mind will scream for stimulation. Your hands will itch for your phone. This isn't failure, this is withdrawal. Every moment you resist is literally rewiring your brain for mental strength training. By day 7, those 15 minutes will feel less like torture and more like recovery. Week 2 is where the dopamine reset kicks in. Extend your silent sessions to 30 minutes. But here's the key. Don't just sit there suffering. Use this time for what I call mental archaeology. Dig into the thoughts and emotions you've been avoiding. That anxiety about your career? Sit with it. That sadness about a relationship? Feel it fully. That anger you've been suppressing? Let it surface. This isn't masochism. This is healing. By week 3, something profound happens. The quiet mind you've been developing starts to carry over into the rest of your day. You'll notice you're less reactive in conversations. You'll catch yourself before automatically reaching for your phone. You'll start making decisions from a place of clarity rather than impulse. This is when monk mode stops being something you do and starts being who you are. Week 4 is where the breakthrough becomes undeniable. You'll extend your practice to an hour, but it won't feel like work anymore. You'll actually crave this time. Your friends might think you're becoming antisocial, but you'll know the truth. You're becoming authentically social. You're choosing connection over compulsion, presence over performance, depth over distraction. But here's what nobody tells you about this journey. The hardest part isn't the silence. It's what the silence reveals. You'll discover dreams you've been ignoring, relationships you've been tolerating, and patterns you've been repeating. The mental clarity that comes from solitude therapy doesn't just show you who you are. It shows you who you could become. The discipline you develop during these 30 days will ripple into every area of your life. You'll find yourself saying no to things that don't serve you. You'll start pursuing goals that actually matter to you. You'll stop being a victim of your circumstances and start being the architect of your experience. This isn't just about becoming comfortable with silence. It's about becoming comfortable with yourself. And when you're truly comfortable with yourself, when you've developed genuine mental strength through focus and isolation, you become unstoppable. Not because you're fighting the world, but because you're no longer fighting yourself. So here we are. You've just discovered something that 99% of people will never understand. That silence isn't empty. It's full of everything you've been looking for. Mental clarity, breakthrough moments, genuine power, authentic recovery. It's all been waiting for you in the one place you've been afraid to look, within yourself. But knowing this and living this are two completely different things. Right now you're at a crossroads. You can close this video, go back to your old patterns, and pretend that constant stimulation is serving you. You can keep running from your own thoughts, keep depending on external validation, keep living in mental chaos. That's the easy path, and it leads exactly where you've already been. Or you can choose the discipline of silence. You can choose monk mode. You can choose to rebuild your mind through focus and isolation. You can choose to become mentally autosufficient in a world designed to keep you dependent. This is the harder path, but it's the only path that leads to genuine freedom. The quiet mind you develop over the next 30 days will become your greatest asset. While others are being manipulated by algorithms, you'll be thinking for yourself. While others are drowning in noise, you'll be creating from clarity. While others are seeking external solutions, you'll have developed internal strength. This isn't just about improving your mental health. This is about reclaiming your life. This is about discovering that you don't need constant entertainment to feel alive, constant validation to feel worthy, or constant stimulation to feel engaged. You are enough. Your mind, when given the chance to reset, is incredibly powerful. Here's what I need you to do right now. First, subscribe and hit that notification bell if this message resonated with you. There's a community of people here who understand that solitude isn't weakness. It's where real strength is forged. You're not alone in choosing this path. Second, comment below with just one word: silence, if you're ready to commit to the 30-day challenge. Let this be your public declaration that you're choosing mental strength training over mental weakness, clarity over chaos, power over dependency. Third, share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. You know who they are. The person who's always stressed, always distracted, always running from themselves. They might not thank you immediately, but when they discover the breakthrough that comes from silence and healing, they'll remember that you cared enough to share. And finally, start today. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when you feel ready. Today, set a timer for 15 minutes. Put your phone in another room. Sit in silence. Let whatever comes up, come up. This is where your recovery begins. This is where you stop being a victim of your mind and start being its master. The silent revolution starts with you. The mental reset you've been craving is 15 minutes away. The discipline that will transform your life is waiting for you to choose it. Your mind is ready to be rebuilt. The question is, are you ready to do the work?